it is really important that we begin to change the mindset of young people to know that your vote counts.
They don't understand that the legislative arm of government is actually a co-equal arm of government.
We have an incredible amount of potential.
Whatever it is I was doing, because of my personal DNA, it had to be of an international standard, which is what, seriously speaking, is all about.
Hello there. On the show today, I'm not really very happy for two reasons. I wonder what kind of future our children will have, given the kind of education that they're getting now. What kind of curriculum are we using to teach our children? I belong to a group that's called an Association for Concerned Mothers. Recently, there was a press conference drawing people's attention to the fact that curricula is very important because certain books in our children's educational system are, not a sight for sore eyes, to tell you the truth. So on the show today, fortunately, I have two sets of people who are both advocates and educators that would help us to understand why it's very important for us as parents or as educators of our children to ensure that the right curriculum is adopted in our school that suits national development. Welcome. This is Seriously Speaking, and my name is Adesuwa Onyenokwe. We'll be back in a short while.
This is instructions for the teacher in the classroom to ask her or his students, how do people express their sexual feelings? What is abstinence? And here are some answers. Oral sex, masturbation, anal sex, massage, holding hands, touching each other's genitals, saying, I like you. And what they're doing is equating all these things. Saying, I like you is equal to anal sex.
It is pornography. Men, especially on the House floor, did not want to look at. We couldn't show this on the television news, but yet we want our fourth grade children to be looking at this book.
In the name of sexuality education, children are seeing obscene materials that have been ruled by Congress and by the Supreme Court impossible to show to children.
An online CSE program for African youth called The World Starts With Me tells children that sexuality includes oral sex and masturbation. It then tells them it's their own choice if they want to lose their virginity. It shows children pictures of naked girls and boys in various stages of development, and then asks them to point out differences in their private parts.
That little clip that you saw just before we came back to the studio is to establish the fact of how easily school curriculum can be corrupted. It was a production of the Family Watch International, and I got to know about it through the Foundation for African Cultural Heritage. One of the members is here, and also a concerned father is here. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today, advocates, I call it, Mr. Ahmed Akombi. It's nice to have you on set.
Thank you so much.
And also Ms. Nkem Agboti. I'm glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Before you start looking like weeping children, you know. But I find it interesting because Mr. Akombi shared his experience at the conference we had, said in March, wasn't it? An international conference about how his daughter walked up to him one day with a literature textbook and he almost passed out when he saw what was inside. Tell us about it, Mr. Akombi.
Well,
where do I start?
Where do I even start from? She came to me and said they were given some textbooks to read, some literature textbooks to read in school. And they were actually asked to summarize those textbooks, but that she doesn't feel comfortable with some parts of those books. I asked her why. She said she believes that the two books contains things she should not be reading. I asked her to bring the books. I went through the books, and when I saw some of the excerpts, I was stunned that how can such books be recommended for GS1 students? Then she was 10 then, okay. But now she's 11. You need to see the contents of this book. Extremely vulgar language, terrible English, very lewd content. And the little girl felt really traumatized. Yes, she was very traumatized because my daughter tends to be sensitive to things like that, really. We held a meeting at home. I asked the mom to go to school, and we made a very strong complaint in school. But the feeble response was that there was nothing they could do about it.
Because it's part of
that
the curriculum.
These were textbooks that were recommended by the Ministry of Education. I felt a bit helpless, but I needed to be able to satisfy my daughter that there must be a remedy in all this, I took it upon myself to write to the Ministry of Education. I actually wrote to the Federal Ministry of Education, copied the FCT Ministry,
because she's in school in Abuja.
Because she's in school in Abuja. Also copied the permanent secretaries of these two ministries. I wrote those letters about 6 months ago, and as I speak, I'm yet to receive any response.
What was your complaint? They should take the books out of the curriculum?
Absolutely, that they should take it out. Because you can imagine having a book which talks about, and I'm quoting now, let me have 7 virgins to cool my belly.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Those were the exact words. And I'm thinking to myself that we all went to school, when we were in school, and we read books written by the likes of Wole Soyinka, we read books written by the likes of Chinua Achebe, Cyprian Ekwensi, Mabel Shegun. We were not subjected to such lewd, terrible content.
Okay, which is where I would like Nkem to come into the conversation now. What has all of this got to do with CSC and the concern of the foundation and all of that?
Well, thank you, Adeswa. What Mr. Akombi has just described fits very well into a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum. Comprehensive sexuality education is that sex education that focuses more on sexual rights than sexual health. There's an emphasis on things like sources of pleasure, validation of different sexual orientations, the need for youth and adolescents to examine their gender identity in spite of their biological sex, the right to safe abortions, and the need for youth and adolescents to have access to condoms and contraceptives as needed.
Is that bad?
Sorry?
Is that bad?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. As I said, the focus is on sexual rights and not sexual health. They're talking more about, look, whatever feelings you're feeling sexually are fine. And whatever you want to do sexually, go ahead and do, as long as you take risk reduction precautions, not risk avoidance, but risk reduction precautions. You know, it also talks about how children, you know, oh gosh.
So I'm just wondering, if that's the case, how do these things, you know, it means that at the end of the day, they come out in the kind of books that are used in schools?
Yes, and I'll tell you, I'll tell you why. Let me rewind a little bit. Mm-hmm. When you look at everything that I've described, the irresistible conclusion is that comprehensive sexuality education has as its objective to modify the gender and sexual norms of society. And you might say, why do I say this? Fast forward to 2013, the CSW. CSW stands for the Commission on the Status of Women. It's a United Nations institution. It's intergovernmental. Nigeria is a member.
And we signed it into women.
We subscribe to it. And Nigeria is a member, and the CSW meets every year. And every year, the members report back to each other on how far they've gone in the effort to achieve gender equality in their respective countries.
So CS is supposed to help people, you know, to cause gender equality?
Supposedly.
That's what they say.
Supposedly. We don't say this. But in 2013, when they had this meeting, one of the conclusions that they came up with was that all member nations need to develop and implement education programs and training material for the comprehensive human sexuality education of youth and adolescents. And the purpose of this is so that the social and cultural patterns of behavior of all men and women in society will be modified for the elimination of prejudice.
So at the end of the day, that will guide the kind of books that are formed. Is that what you think? I mean, after meeting and listening to all that FACT said, what did you go away from that conference with, personally?
For me, I think there's a need for us to have our own homegrown curricula. You know, it's a case of garbage in, garbage out. Whatever these people tell us, we take hook, line, and sinker without considering the fact, the peculiarities of our own local environment. we need to come up with our own educational syllabus, which suits our culture, which suits our beliefs.
Which we all agree to.
Absolutely.
Regardless of, because you're a Muslim, I presume.
Yeah, I'm a Muslim, okay. Which we'd all agree to. That's my own takeaway from that conference.
So I'll take a break so I can talk to the educators now who will tell me how curriculum is developed in our country. So I'll be right back with my next set of guests in a minute.